oh yeah, this guy's like a stalker of mine. And I was like, what? The rabbit hole like gets way deeper.
And I got the creepy fan letters to prove it.
You can't count on anyone, especially your heroes.
Pick up? Okay, I'll call you back later.
She's my boo, and I want to put a baby in her gut.
Huh? Oh, come on! You gotta admit this is cool!
As the entertainment industry adapts to an increasingly online world, so do the dynamics of their fan base. Where once it wasn't uncommon for staff to be ignored by the audience at large, now they're able to take the forefront, accumulating sizable followings on social media. The downside to this is that it leaves them more susceptible to individual harassers, with the limelight simultaneously painting a target on their back. Horror stories of fans turned fanatics were never uncommon in the entertainment industry, but their means of doing so are expanding. We're going to be exploring the story of an individual who felt scorned by the creators they idolized. A person who, then, driven by envy, sought revenge through half a decade of harassment, plagiarism, and even blackmail. This is the story of Luis, known online as Linkar Rocks. First, a bit of context. If there's one thing you can be certain of with Luis, it's that he rarely ever tells the truth. Throughout his various alt accounts and fake identities, he regularly tells bold-faced lies in order to garner sympathy. In the past, this meant posting on numerous e-begging websites in an attempt to solicit donations under false pretenses. For example, in one post, he claims to be unable to pay rent, asking for $2,000 in total. While plausible at first, when viewed in their larger context, you get a different story. These posts, begging for donations to pay off rent or purchase beds for his supposed children, are interspersed throughout other posts attempting to crowdfund his pet projects. In a post made just 4 hours after his plea for rent money, he advertised a Kickstarter campaign he'd created for his web series. Its title advertises that the project would star prolific voice actor Justin Cook. Unrelated note, but in another post, he reveals that the voice actors he'd like to commission cost an estimate of $300 each. So with that in mind, which seems more likely? That he was truly in dire need of financial help, in spite of simultaneously attempting to crowdfund his various animations, or that he was lying, and had he received those donations, they would have been used to illegally fund the aforementioned projects. Well, considering he would have been in high school at the time, the chances of him being a single father in New York are pretty slim. And even at the time, he was confronted by other forum members to the point where he wrote this disclaimer.
I'm doing short cartoons to help support my family. Don't ask me to get a job, get a second job, or anything like that. No haters, please.
All of this is to contextualize that Luis is unquestionably a pathological liar. And although these posts are from 2015, as you'll soon discover, this pattern of behavior continued to this day. Luis liked to talk big. On his Twitter, he would often post about having a slew of pitches and projects on the back burner. At one point, he even claimed to have an LLC. Mind you, none of it was true, it was just a front to appear more legitimate, but his bluff did succeed to the extent of landing him a few voice acting gigs. Before he deactivated on Twitter, his bio claimed that he'd done work for both D-Toons and Animune.
I just gotta set the record straight and say he never did.
It was as he continued to pursue animation, however, that the facade began to slip away. From the animations uploaded to his Newgrounds, one thing that stands out is the sheer amount of tracing throughout.
Oh, honey! Oh, boy!
Luis is rather apparently not an experienced animator, but he still wanted to appear as one. So he would commission animators under false pretenses so he could present it to others as his own work. For example, in December of 2019, he applied to work on the Hazbin Hotel Reanimated project. One of the animations he'd used to apply, Shot 15, was actually done by artist Al Pullen. According to them, they'd been told the animation was for a pilot he was developing. Instead, he traced and colored it before passing it off as his own. And he didn't just do this to animators, he'd also use these shots to entice voice actors into working on his projects, which worked until they realized what his actual animations looked like. In fact, stolen animations seem to comprise the majority of his portfolio. This is a rig from an animation pack by Skynamic Studios, and these are tests for pencilmations that had been sent to him in private. Because most of the animations he stole were sent to him in private, it wasn't apparent that he was a plagiarist. Sure, there was a significant drop in quality after he got hired, but because the sources were hard to trace, there was plausible deniability.
I remember at the time, when I got his test, I remember thinking like, wow, he must have done this in a day, because this is like nothing like the examples that I agreed to give him a test for. So, you know, obviously I didn't go with him because I was like, this is not good. I mean, this is nothing. But I remember at the time thinking that was odd. I was like, like, well, I expected this one to be better. I guess he just didn't try.
I'll steal it! No one will ever know!
On March 13th, 2020, an account under the name TheToyTaker wrote a post on the Bad Webcomics forum gloating about how they blackmailed an artist for a free commission. The poster prefaces that he was invited to a Discord server in which a group of animators were discussing various projects they'd been working on. Of these included Magpie Feather, an animator who'd worked on Hazbin Hotel in the past. At the time, she was developing a project in secret as a gift for a friend. Upon entering the server, TheToyTaker asked if any animators were willing to work pro bono on an animation he claimed would be for his girlfriend's birthday. Naturally, he was told off and subsequently kicked from the server. So, as revenge, he began using information he'd gathered from the server to blackmail her, threatening to spoil the project to her friend. Not wanting to jeopardize the surprise, she gave in and drew him a free piece of art as appeasement. In case you haven't guessed by now, this account was operated by Luis, and he would later use it to make some rather choice comments, such as,
My booze? Why can't you just leave Vizzy Pop alone? She's my boo, and I want to put a baby in her gut. She's just a young girl. Leave her be. You might make her kill herself.
Of course, it wasn't long before Luis began using the account to illegally leak content from her Patreon. This included concept art for future characters, as well as entire projects that hadn't yet been formally announced. For a while, TheToyTaker flew under the radar, only receiving backlash from other posters on the site. That is, until Magpie officially released her project on March 28th. Once the surprise had been revealed, she no longer had to worry about his threats hanging over her head. So, in private, she began spreading the word of what TheToyTaker had done, pointing out that the account was also leaking Vivzy's paywalled content. This led to 2 Discord accounts associated with TheToyTaker to be publicly exposed. As will be reiterated throughout this video, however, Luis is persistent. One thing you'll notice about all the animators Luis commissioned is that they're all tangentially related to Hazbin Hotel. This isn't a coincidence. His TheToyTaker account was only created so he could avoid repercussions for his harassment, having had a main account on the website since November of 2019. On this account, he would gloat about working with Hazbin Hotel animators. This made them uncomfortable because he was parading their involvement as if it was some kind of endorsement. To them, it was just a gig, but he was acting like it meant his project was affiliated with Hazbin Hotel. In fact, this was actually why they became more familiar with Luis under his Mixmaster alias.
First time I kind of was aware of him, I actually do notice the audience members who frequently comment and tweet and all that stuff. So that was kind of where he was originally on my radar. Over time, he showed up more and more like around other people that I knew. And this is under the Mixmaster / Linkar Rocks account. And then he was a patron, which I think happened a little bit later. I noticed that he was starting to be in the calls and he was starting to be in the server. And I was like, okay, so now he's a patron. So this is all context to when my team then began to talk about him, because they started bringing him up. Like, have you guys seen this guy? He comments on everything and he's everywhere and he keeps asking me to do work for him. And that's when the flags officially raised for me, because the team started to go, oh yeah, he's gloating about having Hazbin people involved with his cartoon. And I wasn't okay with it, because I don't like when my artists are exploited. I don't like when my project is exploited. So I was very okay, he's starting to officially get on my bad side once that happened. Once a few people went, oh yeah, this guy contacted me to do a little animation for his thing. A bunch of the other crew members went, oh, he contacted me too. And that's when I kind of was raising my brows, how many people did he reach out to? And then it got back to me that on this forum that he was on, that he was also gloating about having Hazbin people. And I was just kind of why is this dude so obsessed with gloating about having has-been people, and I do understand being excited, because like obviously if you love the project, you're gonna really be excited to work on people who worked on it. Like I'm that way. Like, yeah, it especially when you're like collecting them and gloating about them, and you're not even talking about them or using their name. You're just going, oh yeah, I got a bunch of has-been animators. It's like that's so telling as to like what you wanted from them. You just wanted the fact that there has been, you just want to be able to say you're making Hazbin Hotel Point 2 because you've got a bunch of the same crew.
Eventually, it made them uncomfortable to the point that they decided to politely ask him to stop. They weren't aware of anything else he'd done at the time, so they expected just a short conversation and then the end of it.
And I have some of the caps from like my initial like reach out to him, where I was just like, hey, do you go by Mixmaster on Twitter? Because he was Linkar Rocks on Discord. So I went, are you this account? And I linked it and I was like, hey, just letting you know, a few of my animators and crew members have done work for you, and that's fine. But like, they've been discussing and telling me that they're a little bit uncomfortable because you have used the fact that they are on Hazbin to try to hire other people, because that's a big thing too, is that he was to them even being like, hey, I already have a bunch of Hazbin animators working on this, you should work on it too. Like he was using it to employ people, and that's where I was like, hey, no, don't use this as like your way to get people into your project. Like that's really shady. So I was basically just saying like, hey, this is why they're uncomfortable, it's a little shady, I don't really appreciate it either, can you stop? Very simple. Just, can you not do that? Very, very simple to not do that. And he lied to me, and then I had to call that out. He said, oh, I wasn't even aware of their past work. I'm really sorry that you think that way and stuff. And I literally said, that is false. Like, I was like, that is false. Is this you? Because like, this is who is directly, like, they have shown me evidence that you have said, like, has been people, hell of a people, like, you don't lie to me. You cannot sit here and pretend to play dumb that you don't know what they worked on when you literally have been saying like, oh, I have a bunch of has-been and hell of a people. Of all the lies to do, it was very odd. I was like, why? You're not even lying about doing it. Yeah, it's like he wasn't even lying about doing it. He was lying about knowing about their work. I was just like, what the heck, dude? Obviously, we know now that he's a pathological liar, but the fact that he even thought that one would work was kind of just baffling to me. So I was kind of in this like state of like baffled, and I kind of started to get a little snippier with him. I was just like, okay, like, look, I know that's a lie. Don't do that. They don't appreciate it. And then he started to ask like, well, who is it? And I was like, I'm not going to tell you. Just know that it's been multiple people on the show. And he was like, okay, well, I need to know who it is because I want to write them an apology. And I said, well, if you write an apology here, I can just share it with them. Like, I was ready to be done with it right then. As soon as he sent me the apology, I was like, cool, we're good, you're good.
But then, Luis referenced the fact that he'd done a test for one of her shows.
But then he goes, by the way, I'm working on my Hell of a Horror test and I want to post it. I gave 2 different tests for Hell of a Boss for the new season that we're working on, and one of them was a comedy test and the other one was a horror test. So the fact that he knew that there was a horror test, I was like, that was not something that anyone knew unless they got the test. Like, that was part of the, like, once you signed the NDA, you got the test. So my, like, red flag went, like the siren went off when he said that. I was like, wait a minute. How in the hell does this guy know about my test? So then I kind of was like, the horror test? Like, question mark? Like, I was like,
Which led her to ask him what email he had used to apply.
So I go, horror test, huh? What? And he goes, yeah, I'm working on that one because I know I didn't get on the show, but I'm working on it. And I was like, I didn't send you a test. And he goes, yes, you did. And I was like, can you give me your email again? I don't remember you testing. So do you mind like telling me what email you applied with?
As it turns out, he'd applied twice. The first was under his main account, which she'd ignored because it used his actual work as examples. The second was under a fake name. Though he'd begun the email introducing himself as Luis, the name of the account was Corey Fendelson.
And I remembered at the time, because all this like made me click, like once he started to out himself, because he literally outed himself. He was like, oh yeah, like, I applied and got the test and stuff. So I went and he gave me the email. So I went back and looked for it and found it. And through that, I remembered, oh yes, you're the test. This was the test that I remembered getting back and being like, was this the same person? Because that was literally what I thought. I remember at the time when I got his test, I remember thinking like, wow, he must have done this in a day. You know, obviously I didn't go with him because I was like, this is not good. I mean, this is nothing. But I remember at the time thinking that was odd. I was like, well, I expected this one to be better. I guess he just didn't try.
Upon this revelation, she showed his application to her team, who surprisingly recognized it. As it turns out, he'd also applied to a project by an associate months prior using those exact same storyboards, which she'd recognized as having been done by Mighty Magisword's creator, Kyle Carrozza. Upon confronting him, he feigned ignorance. He had the audacity to claim that it was an accident, in spite of deliberately erasing Carrozza's names from the original boards before submitting them.
Oh my god, I sent you the wrong fucking links. Sorry about that. Those were simple sample tests that I received when I applied to some studios.
Me, like, she immediately she was like, that's Kyle's work. And because I didn't know this was Kyle's work. So she's the one that recognized, oh shit, this is Kyle's work. And he did this to me too. And I was like, what? The DM with him, I don't know if it was posted or not, from him or not, but I have it. It's just me going like, no, like, this is the most unprofessional thing. I was so mad. I was just like, dude, like, what in the universe makes you think that you can trick an employer into giving you a test or giving you a job based on someone else's work? Like, that is the definition of plagiarism and illegal and God, like, what in the universe makes you think that's okay?
And it was as they continued sharing information with each other that they began unraveling his true nature, discovering that Mixmaster Media was the ToyTaker.
Through that, then, you know, again, we were having this big discussion in our server because this was all happening like live. And then Magpie joins in and she goes, wait, Lewis was the name of the guy that we found out was the ToyTaker, because this guy is just a moron. Like, the funniest thing to me about the whole situation is that he's a moron. He's terrible at covering his track. He, as the ToyTaker, tried to commission people and he used his like ToyTaker email and all this shit. And his full name was listed there. And it's crazy because he did it. I would never have known if he had not outed himself there.
Once it was discovered that the ToyTaker account was operated by Luis, it shed light on how he'd entered their server in the first place. Luis had befriended Magpie on Facebook under a different alias, asking for simple requests such as giving him art critique. She added him after seeing that they had mutual friends, these being other artists who'd worked on Hazbin Hotel. On her personal Facebook, she'd posted spoilers for the project, leading him to figure out who the gift was for. Both of the characters Luis requested to be drawn were created by VivziePop, coming from both Hell of a Boss and Zoophobia. In spite of this, after the art had been finished, he began trash-talking VivziePop and her work at length to Magpie. He began calling her a spoiled little brat and complaining about the show's offensive humor. And as if that wasn't strange enough to do to someone you just blackmailed, he began asking her for art advice. And the day after he bragged about extorting her on the Bad Webcomics forum, he felt inclined to ask Magpie this.
Say, when you hear my words, do you picture me as some sort of manipulative monster? Hypothetically speaking, if you don't mind. And be honest.
As mentioned before, Luis had befriended her under his main alias. Well, once the blackmail was made public, he went on his main account and attempted to comfort her about the situation, threatening to take care of the ToyTaker himself. Luis, I'ma fuck this cunt up. Magpie, I don't understand how someone could do this and be proud of it. People in the comments are bashing him. Luis, good, that fucking prick deserves it. And Viv's Patreon call is cancelled because Viv's not doing good mentally. That's it, I'm confronting this guy myself. I'ma teach that punk a lesson. Magpie, not now please, cause I don't want him to leak my stuff. If this gets leaked, all my surprise is spoiled. I really don't want to risk this getting leaked. Luis, sign, very well. I got my eye on his dick though. It's very sweet how much sacrifices you're making for your friend.
But then also, he would go onto the Blinkar account and then comfort her. And he was like, oh, you know, I wish I could just beat this guy up. It's just so disgusting. I wish I could just beat him up. He's so gross and disgusting. And I'm like, you're talking about yourself like he's so, it's mind-boggling.
He even alluded to his knowledge of abusing Patreon to her. Luis, the fuck? That's a fucking dumb shit troll. It sickens me when people abuse Patreon. Be warned, some people found a loophole to that by calling their bank. Or he'd take it up with PayPal. No tango idea on the aspects of that. So Luis invented a persona to harass these artists, then attempted to get on their good side by comforting them about his own actions under a different alias. He was not just infiltrating their Patreon accounts, but their personal Facebook accounts and social circles. As she promised to do in their conversation, Vivzy informed Kyle Carrozza that Luis was plagiarizing his work, but what she didn't realize is just how deep the rabbit hole went.
And I'm mutuals with Kyle, so I immediately DM'd him. And I went, hey, Kyle, I hate to bring this up. I know we've never really spoken, but just letting you know, someone applied to me with your work, and I gave them a test because I thought, I didn't know it was not their work. Just letting you know that this guy did this. I don't know if you want to say anything to him or do anything. I don't, because he's plagiarizing you. And that's when Kyle told me, oh yeah, this guy's a stalker of mine. And I was like, what? The rabbit hole gets way deeper. And just everything started to unravel because it all unraveled because he literally outed himself.
When Luis's plagiarism was first exposed, many assumed it had been done with purely cynical intentions, that he'd stolen an artist's work at random just for a better chance of getting hired. But upon the discovery of his blog, it became apparent that there was something far more sinister at hand. As mentioned before, these storyboards were done by Kyle A. Carrozza, an industry animator known for creating Cartoon Network's Mighty Magiswords. Well, the usage of his work was no coincidence. Luis was modeling his entire internet presence off Kyle Carrozza, down to his blog's layout. His header boasts of him being an accordion artist, and he went so far as to pose with the instrument on the cover of his voice acting reel. However, he's never actually demonstrated playing the instrument before, and given his track record, it's likely he only purchased the instrument as a prop to appear more similar to Carrozza, who's released several accordion-centric EPs. One of his aliases, Raymond Spunk, is based off John Kay's fictional character Raymond Spum. When he began imitating Kyle, he changed his alias to EP Ray, copying his pseudonym TV's Kyle. On a crowdfunding campaign he made under that alias, he went so far as to steal a pitch Kyle had worked on in the 90s, editing Kyle's voice out and replacing it with his own.
Mom? Are you there? This school is really weird. Pick up. Are you there? Okay, I'll call you later.
Mom? Are you there? This school is really weird. Pick up. Okay, I'll call you back later.
It was also under his Raymond Spunk alias that he would write this choice casting call.
My name is Ray Spunk, and I'm doing a student film. I'm in need of a female actor for a specific role in my film. For this film, I want a female actor to suck on a baby's pacifier, wear a diaper, and look around her area with her eyes. I don't want any nudity or sexual context because that comes out of my average. This is strictly a PG-13 short film, and I want it to be as clean as possible. I just want her to have a pacifier in her mouth and suck on it while wearing a diaper. I know what you're thinking. Yes, it sounds weird. And no, it's not a fetish thing. I need these clips for a rotoscoping technique that I've been trying to practice and lay down. I'm sorry if you approach this offer in an obscure, different way, but that's showbiz for you. You live and you learn. And please don't mention the fact that it sounds weird or fetishy, cause it's not, because it irritates me with those comments.
In 2017, he attempted to pitch a show to Channel Frederator. They turned him down after recognizing the artwork he submitted as belonging to their former collaborator. They detail his relentlessness in a correspondence with Kyle. Eric, so I'm reading this pitch and I'm thinking, this is a little derivative. Then I got to this and I even heard Gruber's voice as I read it. I hope all is well at CN. Kyle, say, was that pitch written by a fellow who goes by the name Louis Kendall, or perhaps Linkar Rocks? Eric, never got an email from Luis, but I've gotten plenty from Linkar Rocks, aka Corncake Pickle, Aristotle Michelangelo, Serge Olafsson, and Mickey. This time he went by Master Sensei with the email youcan'tsuemehaha@gmail.com. I feel stupid for treating him like he was someone new. Especially now that we can't sue him, haha. He did cite our submissions release as James Dewright from West Orange, New Jersey. I want to retire. The "you can't sue me" address is important, as this is one of the many ways Luis avoids repercussion. He will sign contracts using fake pseudonyms under the belief that this will then make the contract void. But all of this is only scratching the surface, as Luis's obsession with Kyle went beyond imitation. Luis has been consistently stalking and harassing Carrozza for over half a decade, starting sometime around 2014. At one point, he would do this through interviews. He would constantly make new identities and email addresses to ask Kyle questions under the guise of an interview. When Kyle responded, he would continuously ask more questions to keep the interaction going, endlessly dragging the conversation on forever. Once Kyle began to catch on, he stopped interacting with him, leading Luis to begin harassing the rest of the artists who worked on his show. He would begin by innocently asking them for an interview, before eventually pivoting to asking questions about Kyle. And that wasn't the only boundary he crossed. Luis even went so far as to stalk Kyle's family, at one point awkwardly calling Kyle's mother on the phone. As you can probably guess, it wasn't long before the situation was made public. Luis was publicly chastised for his actions, leading him to wipe his entire presence from the internet. For the time being, Luis is gone. Of course, that doesn't mean it's over. Luis has a habit of changing his alias, constantly cycling through accounts, adopting new pseudonyms, and even posing as others to save face. It's only a matter of time before he tries to return under a new name, if he hasn't already. Luis is just one of the many bad faith actors that exist online. Ultimately, the best course of action to protect yourself is not to watch out for him specifically, but for people who act like him. Because the tragedy of this whole ordeal is that he took advantage of artists' goodwill and repeatedly used it against them.
And Magpie especially, I think Magpie has the most experience with him because Magpie also endured the ToyTaker situation. So like this guy had a weird fixation on Magpie specifically, and I don't really know why. I think it's because she's really, really open. Like she's very accessible. She's very kind. So, you know, it was very easy for him to slip in and take advantage of her, which really burns me up.